Is 5,000 Manta good enough for me? Even though I can't speak on anyone's behalf, and even though nothing I say is financial advice, I would say yes, it's good enough for me because if let's say Manta were to go to the price of $20, which is my price target for it, in theory, for this bull run, at that point, we do some basic math. 5,000 Manta times $20, that's $100,000. There is no guarantee it's going to happen, but some people may be thinking, oh, what, 100,000? Take a look at the price of homes. They're very expensive. I totally understand that. But the way I take a look at it is that, first of all, that's a pretty good down payment for a very decent home. Not to mention, many people that I know out there, they're not only just holding Manta. So let's say in theory, we assume a make-believe scenario. There's a very well-diversified portfolio, a bunch of good projects, and let's say Manta is somewhere along there. To be a little bit specific, let's say 5,000 Manta. Now let's say Manta goes to the price of $20. That point, that holding becomes 100,000, considering if other projects did do well too in that portfolio, still isn't bad. But even if, let's say, I was only holding Manta and my Manta holding became $100,000, and let's say I just saved 30% of that, 30K, right? And I use this 30K for the next cycle, and in the next cycle, let's say it does a 10X, that becomes 300,000. That's a very good starting point, at least personally for me, even though I'm not telling anyone to buy Manta, but this is just my perspective. Now, you're probably wondering why the lighting situation. It's because my light literally just, shut off, but I'm going to fix it later. But even besides that point, some people may be wondering, okay, why did the light change? But you know what? The show must continue because I don't stop like that, man. I don't give up. Here's the thing. Also, not to mention, if let's say, 100,000 people think, oh, that's kind of like, not that much again. The way I view it is that I've known some people personally who had around $50,000 and they were able to travel the world for around 2 years. Now, they're not going to 5-star restaurants or, these fancy hotels every day. They weren't doing that, but still they were able to travel, meet new people, gain new experiences. So I don't think it's that bad anyways. But even besides all that, let me explain why I don't think that Manta at the price of $20 is too much to ask for. Because if let's say you were to go to that price, considering current circulating supply, market cap at that point would be around $8 billion. Now we got to think about this. Even though that's around a 78x from here, an $8 billion market cap in the grand scheme of things, in my opinion, is kind of like minuscule because if we've seen Dogecoin back in 2021, that reached over $80 billion in market cap. And I mean, come on, that's a meme coin. And I feel like the factors back then were a lot less bullish than as of right now. Many people out there are assuming that many meme coins out there are going to outperform an $8 billion market cap for this bull run. So I don't think this is too much to ask for. The reason why I don't think Manta could reach like a $50, $100 billion market cap is because not every single project I think is destined for stuff like that. But even besides that, the way I take a look at it is that still, I don't view it as a bad amount. And keep in mind, $20 is around a 78x from here. Personally, if someone asked me would I rather buy Shiba Inu, Dogecoin, or Manta, hands down it's going to have to be Manta. I think it's way better. And what is a major reason why I think $20 could hypothetically happen? It's because I think Manta has amazing fundamentals. I mean, let's take this into consideration. The Manta Network offers two networks. The first is Manta Atlantic and the second is Manta Pacific. Now I'm going to explain these two, right? Because if we take a look at, first of all, Manta Pacific, it's a modular layer 2 ecosystem on Ethereum for EVM, or should I say Ethereum Virtual Machine native ZK applications. Now, ZK, some people may be wondering, okay, what is that? ZK stands for zero knowledge. And the reason why this is amazing is because the benefit of zero knowledge technology is allowing for greater scalability and enhancing privacy. And as we all know, something like Ethereum, a lot of people would argue that, it lacks scalability. So the way you take a look at it is that, of course, this really does matter, especially again for a modular layer 2 ecosystem on Ethereum. So yeah, I think that's very amazing. But even besides that, we take a look at the second network, which is Manta Atlantic. Now, this is allegedly the fastest ZK, and again, I talked about ZK before, zero knowledge layer 1 chain on Polkadot. And Polkadot is a very amazing project, by the way. I'm very bullish on it. So when I see something like this, allegedly holding the title of, again, being the fastest ZK layer 1 chain on Polkadot, that means something to me. It means a lot, actually. And we got to think about this, right? Polkadot what it's trying to do is connect blockchains together. It's focused on something called interoperability. And let's take this also into consideration. I'm going to talk about something called the Calamari network. But in order to understand the role in which Calamari plays when it comes to the Manta network, it's first important to understand also, the role of Kusama for Polkadot, because the Calamari network is quite essentially the canary network to the Manta network. But then, of course, we all know that Manta has pretty close ties to Polkadot, just like I mentioned before. And when it comes to Polkadot, it has a canary network called Kusama. But now that I got that out of the way, basically, if I use something like Kusama and Polkadot as an example to kind of showcase the role in which Calamari plays with Manta, we'll see that when it comes to the Kusama network, it's basically kind of like a testing ground, the way you take a look at it, because usually projects that want to launch on Polkadot, they'll usually launch on, Kusama first as a way to test out the project under real economic conditions. And then after that, if let's say they like it, they move on later to Polkadot, but they don't necessarily have to move on to Polkadot if they don't want to. Like for instance, Moonriver is on Kusama. But the reason why some developers may choose Kusama instead of Polkadot to begin with is because, first of all, it's far cheaper to rent building space on Kusama, and not to mention it's easier to make changes on. So of course, it's just much more logical in a sense to kind of have like a test run in a sense before moving on to the real thing. And the Calamari network, again, it's basically something like that, but then for the Manta network. But even besides all that, the way you take a look at it is that Manta, it's an absolute no-brainer for me. Keep in mind, right, usually altcoins, as a worst case scenario, they typically peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. Now, the last Bitcoin halving event happened in April of last year, so we add 18 months on top of that. That's around October this year. Is that necessarily such a long time? Not really. I mean, we're already halfway through 2025 pretty much. So again, I don't view that as a bad time frame. That doesn't mean it's going to be accurate though, because that's just based off history. There's no telling whether or not altcoins are going to peak as a worst case in November, December, January of next year, maybe. Who knows, right? Maybe even earlier, let's say, August. We just don't really know. But then what can I control? That is myself. And that's just by accumulating, holding, and just waiting. That's it. Because again, the market's going to wake up when it wants to wake up. I can't demand it to wake up. However, the only thing I can control is myself. And that's just accumulating, holding, and just waiting because, eventually, if the market does wake up for altcoins, then I'll be prepared, right? Because I was just in the market the whole time to begin with. So again, I'm just staying patient here. And when it comes to the idea of Manta going to the price of $20 during this run, that right there wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. And make sure to subscribe if you gain value from this video. I greatly appreciate it. It's Finley the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.